might report on the cases overnight. So we've had 3 new cases. We've had one which is an international arrival who was in hotel quarantine, and we've had 2 others that were a couple from Brisbane who attended the Apollo restaurant in Sydney, came back from Sydney and self-isolated. So that is very good news about what that couple did, and it's a lesson to everyone about how we have to treat this very seriously. Yesterday, Queensland Health carried out more than 6,800 tests, and almost 1,000 of them were in the Metro South area. And the Deputy Premier and the Chief Health Officer will discuss that in a little bit more detail. But can I, from the outset, commend both health and the police for the rapid response that they have been deploying over the last 24 hours. This is exactly the scenario that we have been planning, and the rapid response is exceptional. So I just want to make a few comments to Queenslanders as well. During this time, we need to make sure that everyone is doing the right thing. We need to make sure that if you are sick, you are getting tested, and I want everyone to listen to Dr. Young. And if you are sick, stay at home. Do not go to work. It is absolutely vital. And you must keep up that social distancing. So if you are going to a shopping centre and you are seeing people not social distancing, you should leave. I mean, now is not the time to be in extremely large gatherings where people are not social distancing. We really want people to come and get tested, especially if they're in the Brisbane area, if they have any symptoms whatsoever. But we are in terms of what's happened overnight, that is the best scenario we could have hoped for after all of that testing was carried out. But of course, testing is indeed important. The Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner will address the issues of the 3 women that were involved in coming back from Melbourne, so they will address that. And of course, we declared yesterday Greater Sydney a hotspot that will take effect from 1 a.m. Saturday. And I think you can see from the couple that have come back from that Apollo restaurant, that is definitely the right decision that we have made to protect Queensland and Queenslanders' health. So look, I'll hand over to the Deputy Premier to say a few more comments, and then Dr. Young, and then the Police Commissioner and our Deputy Police Commissioner, Stephen. Thank you.
So the 3 additional cases of COVID-19 we're reporting here in Queensland today brings our total now to 1,082. 11 of those are active and 5 are in hospital. The 3 new cases are unrelated to the 3 cases that we reported yesterday. First, a man in his 20s who had returned from the United States and was in quarantine, and a couple who had eaten at the Apollo restaurant in Potts Point in Sydney, which is a known cluster, an identified cluster. They had chosen to self-isolate, and I thank them for that decision. It has kept Queenslanders safe. The fact that 2 of these 3 new cases came from Sydney, as well as the fact that 2 of the cases we reported yesterday had transited through Sydney, underlines how important it is that we have made that decision to declare Greater Sydney as a hotspot. It will allow us to control cases returning from Sydney where we know there are outbreaks. So that means it was the right decision. I want to thank the 979 people in the south side of Brisbane who went and got tested yesterday. That's a 4-fold increase in the average number of tests we normally do in Metro South, and it is exactly how we will ensure that we do not have community transmission from the cases there. 255 of those were tested at the school where we know one of those active cases had been. There are now 6 locations in Metro South where people can get tested We tested 6,826 people yesterday, and all of the other tests were negative. That really is the best we could have hoped for in the first 24 hours of our rapid response to those new cases, and we would certainly hope to see another 24 hours like that. A lot of tests. If there is anyone else out there who has been infected, we want to find them. There are 94 aged care facilities in the south side of Brisbane that are now locked down to visitors until we ensure that there is no risk of them being infected. Police believe that they have now identified all 3 Queenslanders who were at that party in Melbourne. That is, we don't think there are any others. We've now translated the health advice from yesterday into 10 different languages. The Chief Health Officer has met with community leaders, multicultural leaders. We want to ensure that everyone in Queensland, no matter where they are, what community they identify with, what language group they identify with, that everybody in Queensland knows what they can do to keep themselves and their community safe. First and foremost, that is go and get tested. If they have any doubt at all, any reason at all, they should go and get tested. We are just beginning to hear reports out of Victoria that they may have a record number of cases to report today, and so we continue to monitor what's happening in other states very carefully, but it underlines how now is not the time to travel. Any travel that can be avoided should be avoided. We want to do everything we can to keep Queenslanders safe.
So in Queensland we had 3 new cases yesterday, 2 of them in women who'd been down to Victoria, and one of them was the sister of one of those 2 women. We've had no further cases related to that cluster, but it's important that we keep on testing and we keep on being alert to more cases. Then today we've had 3 new cases. One, a gentleman who recently returned from the United States and was in hotel quarantine, and 2 in a couple who recently returned from Sydney, and they had chosen themselves to go into quarantine in their home. At the stage when they returned, Sydney was not regarded a hotspot. So that was an excellent response by those people. As of 1 a.m. Saturday, all of metropolitan Sydney and some of the surrounding areas have been declared a hotspot, meaning anyone who's been through that area will need to quarantine in a hotel when they come into Queensland. And that's important because we can now say over the last 2 days we've had 6 new cases. It's been a long time in Queensland since we've really had those sorts of new case numbers. So this is an increasingly risky time for Queensland. We need to get through the next week, and that's really important. So everyone, if you're unwell, it doesn't matter where you are in Queensland, if you're in South Queensland definitely, but anywhere else, unwell with any symptoms, please come forward immediately, get tested and isolate yourself until you get that result. Or if you do get that result and it's negative, then until your symptoms have resolved. This is not the time for anyone to be spreading any symptoms through the community, because that makes it much harder to work out what is going on. So first, if you're unwell, isolate yourself and get tested. Secondly, you have to maintain social distancing. I know it's so alien to all of us. We're humans, we want to be in close contact with people, but this is the time that you must maintain that 1.5 metre distance and wash your hands regularly. That's really important. Then the third thing is, don't go to places where we know there are cases. So don't go overseas unless you really have to. Don't go to Victoria, anywhere in Victoria, and really reconsider if you need to go anywhere in New South Wales, and particularly don't go to Greater Sydney. We know there are more cases there, and that puts yourself at risk and your family at risk, and you will be required to quarantine in a hotel if you come back. All those things are really important. then there are other things that you can do to help yourself and your family in the community. If you're going to clubs, pubs, restaurants, make sure you leave your contact details. That's really important. I would really like if every single Australian downloaded the COVID Safe app. That would be a fantastic result. But to date we haven't. 1/4 of us have. I have, because I think that is the best way I can protect my family. I know I'm the highest risk in our family. I'm out and about far more than my family is. So I want to know the second I've been in contact with someone who has COVID-19, so I can go home to my family and say, now you have to genuinely stay away from me. So please, I do request every single Queenslander to download the COVID Safe app. That's a really important tool that would just help us. We have now contact traced all of the people who've been in close contact with that first confirmed case who went to Melbourne. Unfortunately, the second confirmed case has not wanted to let us know where she's been. So therefore, that's why I'm spreading that message that if anyone is unwell, to please get tested, because I don't know where that second case has been. So that is really, really important. So everyone, stay home, get tested if you're sick, maintain social distancing, and don't go to places where we know there are high numbers of cases. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I was just going to make a couple of comments about the 3 ladies that went interstate and are now back in Queensland and obviously subject to investigations by the police. Police have identified all those women now, all 3 that went into Victoria and returned into Queensland. That was the assistance, obviously, with our Victorian counterparts, and obviously with just a sterling job by the Queensland Police Service to get to the bottom of some of the issues that are taking place. I am obviously bitterly disappointed that we're at this stage. They went to extraordinary lengths to be deceitful and deceptive and, quite frankly, criminal in their behaviour, and that is what has put the community at risk. From the beginning of this, we've issued well over 1,100 infringement notices, and 14 people have made false declarations at our borders. I've asked the ones issued recently, in particular to these women, the infringement notices to be renewed and for them to actually go before court with notice to appear. This is purposely so, to send a message that we will not tolerate this behaviour at our borders and putting all our people at risk. We will review our infringement notices in the future to make sure that we are taking a tough stance on this. But I do want to make another couple of comments, and the Premier has touched on this. Our framework and our rapid response is extraordinarily solid. We have planned for this, we have exercised this, and obviously in the last few days it has come to fruition and it has worked extraordinarily well. So I think everyone in Queensland can have high confidence that what we are doing to protect our state is working extraordinarily and exceptionally well. And I'll leave the answers till after the Deputy Commissioner, the questions after the Deputy Commissioner. Thank you for that.
Morning. Can I just start with the overarching system that we have in place with our borders, and just remind everyone that borders are the first line of defence for us. And as the Chief Health Officer said, the next layer of defence is our social distancing. And the reason why that's so important is because the borders are not 100% guaranteed. As we've seen, we've had some people come into this state that have tested COVID positive. So social distancing, very important. And our third layer of defence with our rapid response is currently in play, and as the State Disaster Coordinator, I can assure you is operating at a very high level, and we have great confidence in what it's doing. I'll come back to the investigation shortly, but I just want to point out that our border controls are working effectively. So our review of what's happened has demonstrated that the borders and the border controls that we have in place are doing what they are designed to do. What we've seen in this instance are deliberate acts of deception. The way that our borders operate cannot prevent that. It is incredibly important that everyone that comes into Queensland are accurate in terms of their declaration. Now, and in this instance, it's not a matter of identity. There is no false identity. It's about not declaring where people have been. Now, our ability to say, where have you been for the entire period that you've been out of this state, we are unable to do that. We rely on the community telling us. The purpose for that is to stop the spread of this deadly disease. This disease kills people. This disease makes people very sick. This disease costs people's livelihoods, and this disease has really impacted on our community. Everyone, irrespective of their background, has to do the right thing and absolutely has to declare where they have been. If they do that, they'll be able to come out into Queensland, and there may be conditions with that with quarantine, but we'll work with them. So very important. If I could go back to the investigation, as the Commissioner has alluded to, we have high confidence that there were only 3 people that have gone to Victoria, have gone to this party and then returned. We have identified those, and in fact we have identified everyone that was at that party in Victoria with our Victorian colleagues, and we have high confidence around that. So our focus now is working with those young women to identify everywhere that they have been since they have come back into Queensland. As you've heard, one has been cooperative, one has not been cooperative. We'll continue to use the powers that we have at our disposal, including considering further offences by anyone that doesn't cooperate with the investigation, to try and get that information out so that we can absolutely focus on identifying where any risk might be for our community and take the appropriate action. We're still working with the 3rd person that was identified late yesterday. So just to clarify, there are 3 young women who have gone to Victoria who have been exposed to COVID. 2 have tested positive for COVID. All 3 are in quarantine. The 3rd has not tested positive for COVID, and the other person that's connected to them that has tested positive for COVID is a relative of one of the first 2. With respect to what's happening, as the Commissioner alluded to, these persons will be put before the court. The investigation is not yet concluded. Those charges will be formalised during today, and further announcements will be made about them later. Thank you. Matters of guilt and innocence in terms of imprisonment's a matter for courts. The courts will do what they have to do. Just bear in mind too that 2 of these people are currently ill with COVID, which is another astounding thing. They put themselves and everyone else at risk. You know, they're not getting treatment is quite amazing, really, and not in a good way. So we'll have to work through and see when's the appropriate time we can take that action. It may be we have to wait for some time before they can go before the court. We'll announce that later in the day. We're yet to finalise the investigation in relation to that specific.
You and the Commissioner said the border protections are working effectively. How did these women come back from Melbourne and get through the airport? Nobody knew they'd falsified records, nobody knew they'd been to Melbourne, and then they spend 8 days out of the community. How did that happen?
So, Lane, there's 95,000 people have come through our air borders since the 10th of July. 95,000 people have come through. The vast majority have done exactly what we expect them. Fill out a border declaration pass and say where you have been. Nominate whether you've been in a hotspot. We have got significant numbers of people that have gone into quarantine because they've come back from a hotspot. These people, on our investigation, and we will allege to the court, have deliberately deceived us. Knowingly and deliberately deceived us about where they've been. Now, there is no system in the world, unless we track people, that can tell us exactly where those people have been. And because they transited through Sydney, the only information available to the police was the fact that they'd bought a flight in Sydney.
So, did you say before that you can't ask where they've been?
No, we do ask where they've been. But they deliberately, in this instance, what we will say is that they've deliberately falsely said where they have been.
Is there any way that manifest can be checked to see where they've been?
Look, they are the sorts of things we can do when we're investigating. There are privacy issues around this in terms of the information we can access in a proactive manner. The airlines have been very cooperative in terms of how we deal with these things. But generally speaking, we can only access certain information when we're doing an investigation for a crime that's been occurred.
What do you know about this party that they went to in Melbourne? How many people were there?
So we understand there was somewhere between 20 and 30 people. Victoria Police took action against all of them. I don't have the exact details. I understand there was a disturbance which related to why the police had been called to it. They took the appropriate action. It's through that action by police in Victoria that we know exactly who was at that party, and we can rule out the fact that there were other Queenslanders.
Can you explain why they're wanted by Victoria Police?
I'm not saying they are wanted by Victorian Police.
There were reports this morning that they...
Yeah, no, look, we're still working with the Victorian authorities. We're also interested in their activities as to what they were doing, and certainly any of their activities since they've been in Queensland and before that. So there are other investigations ongoing at the moment that I won't comment on.
Are you saying that the
Absolutely. So this is the issue. Real issue for us is one of where have you been and have you been in a hotspot? So they were able to come through. We've been able to retrieve their border declaration passes. The problem we've got is where they've said they've been. Yeah. So we're working through that. No, I'm not. I have no information around what Victoria Police are doing about that at the moment.
Just to clarify very quickly, of those 970 odd tests that were done Metro South yesterday around Logan and those areas, are you saying that none have returned positive, or is it too early?
It's too early to have got all of those results back, but all the results that we have got back, none have been positive, other than the 3 I've told you about, which weren't related to those Melbourne clusters.
So quickly? I mean, it hasn't been 24 hours.
We usually get results in about 24 hours, so we'll be getting those results back today.
And there's the wait time for test results. You understand some people have been told it was 24 hours, but now it's increased to 72 hours.
No, it depends who's doing the test. So we do have some interstate companies, private pathology firms that test in Queensland, and those take longer. QML and SNP, who are the 2 Queensland-based private pathology firms, they also have labs elsewhere in the country, but they've got labs here in Brisbane, usually 24 hours, unless of course from a regional area. And Pathology Queensland, so the Queensland Health Pathology Unit, it's usually 24 hours.
We saw an increase outbreaks around in New South Wales with declaring hotspots. Do you think it's inevitable that the borders will have to close again?
No, I don't think it's inevitable. I think that New South Wales is getting on top of those clusters, but until they do, it's sensible, and we've seen that today, it's sensible to close the border to anyone who's been in Greater Sydney.
One of the restaurants.
Not at this stage. It'll depend on the results we get over the next 24, 48 hours, whether anything like that's required. But it's really important that people adhere to the restrictions that are in place today, which means there are limits on people who can go into venues, 1 person per 4 square metres, other than for very small venues when it's capped at 50 with 1 per 2. That's a really important restriction. And to give genuine contact details. So people who give false details are just slowing down the speed at which they'll get contacted. So they're then putting their family at risk. Yes, that's what we're doing today. We're making sure that we won't get a second wave. That's our job, to be prepared and to stop the second wave.
Aged care homes, you've brought in restrictions in Metro South, but I'm told that Tricare nursing homes are now saying they're reducing visitor hours to 2 hours each day in other parts of the state. Is that appropriate, or are you concerned they might be locking down too early?
I think that our aged care facilities in Queensland have done a fantastic job from day one. They have looked out for their residents very, very carefully, and if they think it's important that they reduce visiting, then I will totally support them. I think it's very important that in Metro South and Westmoreton, where I've asked the aged care facilities to reduce visitors, to enhance screening of their staff and to minimise movement of staff between facilities, that they do that. The rest of the state, I think it's important that the aged care facilities look at their own risk and make decisions.
One of the restaurants, the girls, women visited, said they only heard about this by a text message from their friend, that they hadn't heard from Queensland Health first. Do you believe you acted swiftly enough to let these businesses know?
Yes, we first found out only day before yesterday that we had that 1 positive case, and immediately worked with the school, and then all yesterday worked with a whole range of venues. So now all venues have been contacted, and anyone who's gone to those venues that we believe is a close contact, we've contacted. I'm very worried about the second individual who has not been cooperative and has not shared with us where she's been, so we've not been able to contact those venues. We'll continue to work with that individual and hopefully get information. But that's why I'm saying that people should be very cautious. If they've got any symptoms at all, doesn't matter where they live, in Brisbane or indeed anywhere in the state, this is the time to go and get yourself tested.
What things can you do to try and ascertain that second person's movements? If she won't be cooperative, and maybe this is one for the police, I'm not sure, but can you do things like check the tracking on her with her phone or something like that? What can you actually do apart from asking her?
Police are doing all of that.
Yes, and there'll be a lot more of asking going on. So obviously, as I mentioned before, there are powers under the Health Act that declare that. So we have our officers appointed as Emergency Officers General under the Health Act, and they are able to exercise the powers there. So she's being compelled to provide information and chooses not to. There are offences that are committed, so there are potentially more charges that can come if persons refuse to cooperate. We don't generally reveal all of our methodologies. Let's just say that we're not leaving any stone unturned to try and work out where these people have been.
Did you say she has been compelled?
We're in the process of going through that, so we've already interviewed once and we'll be going back again, but at this stage we're not getting the information that we need. Look, I won't go into too much detail other than they indicated they'd only been in Sydney.
Dr. Young, can I quickly just ask you again? Victoria today, 723 new cases. It seems like their contact tracing is just isn't really being that effective at the moment. Is that a situation that can happen? And what do you think of that situation, the contact tracing happening down there?
We've been providing support to them with contact tracing because they didn't have sufficient to manage that. I believe we do have sufficient to manage a similar scenario if it were to happen in Queensland, due to the work that we've done across whole of government that the Premier led. I've been given enormous resources so that we do have staff from other agencies that we've been training up to be contact tracers. So I don't have any concerns that we wouldn't have enough contact tracers.
Is it inevitable that there will be more cases coming out of the Logan Springfield area from these three women?
No, it's not inevitable.
So we can walk away scot-free?
Well, we've had 3 cases. And it's too early to say we'll work away scot-free. We need to have a lot more testing over the next 48 hours before we can say that we've got it in hand. It's reassuring that we've not got any more positives, but it's far, far too early to be complacent. The message is that anyone who lives in South Brisbane, in Logan, Springfield, anywhere in that area, any symptom at all, please just come forward and get tested, because the quicker we can find people, the quicker we can then stop that train of transmission. And that's what this is all about. We don't want that second, third, fourth generation number of cases. We want to really clamp on this as quickly as we can.
The school at Logan Hospital yesterday, with all those people going in, you would have been happy to see that?
Oh, very, very happy, yes. The more people who come forward and get tested, the better. That is our best strategy, to really get a feel for where we've got cases. And we're so lucky in Queensland that we've got a superb pathology sector, both in the public and the private, so we can test. We can test up to 10,000 people per day, and then we've got more capacity we could turn on if we needed to.
Can I just, first of all, I just want to follow up on what Lane was saying there too. Can I just say too, can I thank the enormous community response to coming out and getting tested yesterday. That was heartening to see that Queenslanders acted so quickly, but our message is very clear that if you are sick, any symptoms, get tested. We have clinics available across Queensland. It is very, very important. And everyone has a responsibility to do the right thing to protect Queenslanders. Yes. Yes. This is about protecting Queenslanders. It's about protecting our families. It's about protecting the health. And we need to get on top of it. We need to make sure that Queensland is safe, and then we can continue to go about our daily jobs and duties in whichever way that means. That is really important to me. And I'm sorry if there are some cancellations, but Queenslanders can support Queenslanders during this time. I'm not making any apologies for making sure that Greater Sydney is now a COVID hotspot.
You've made
hotel quarantine free again?
No.
Premier, do you think an honesty system is good enough for our borders, and how do you think Queensland?
Yeah, Jack, most people are doing the right thing. You heard the Commissioner and the Deputy Commissioner. It is unbelievable to think that Queenslanders are putting other Queenslanders at risk. That's what really annoys me here. And there is a social responsibility here for everyone to do the right thing. And they have put the health of Queenslanders and their families at risk. That's what they've done.
Given your
Will you tell me what other system we're supposed to have? Well, the majority of people are doing the right thing, Jack. These are people who deliberately went about doing the wrong thing. Deliberately.
given your anger and
Yeah, I am angry.
Bringing laws to jail people, and you hear Dr. Young and the police say that
Yep.
one of them's still not cooperating. Surely you'd want the book thrown at them and jailed when they get to court.
I'm not the court system, but you know what they have done is put the health and well-being and lives of Queenslanders at risk. I think that speaks volumes. Yes, then we might wrap up.
I don't know what type of party it was, but certainly the girls from Queensland were well involved in that party, and as a result they and all the others received an infringement notice when they were in Victoria. Can I go to the point about the people doing the wrong thing? Unfortunately, we're all going to get a 1% of people doing the wrong thing. That's what we respond to all the time. So we have got a group of people, whether it's in everyday life or at our borders, that are going to do the wrong thing. We think the processes and the systems are excellent. But if you go like they did and spend an awful amount of time planning how they are going to deceive and be deceitful, that's doing the wrong thing. And unfortunately, sorry, can I just touch on this, because that is that small percentage that always makes it extraordinarily difficult for everyone to keep us safe, you name it. And these people still are not being cooperative. Our police will obviously take some action in relation to that. But you've got to have confidence that the system that we have in place is exceptional. It is exceptional compared to what we see in other parts of the country.
You touched on it there, Commissioner. I mean, something like this takes a bit of planning, doesn't it? It's
Yes.
not just a spur of the moment.
They planned, I think, and look, I'm only... I believe that obviously there were plans going into Victoria as to what they were going to do down there, as well as obviously how they were going to make their way back. Unfortunately, we often deal with a group of people that has no regard for others, and we find ourselves in an extraordinarily difficult situation. We talk about, and we have from the very beginning, those that have a reckless disregard for others, and this is what we're talking about.
Would you be
There's
pushing
obviously
for jail?
quite a lot of anger in those communities we've been seeing down at Logan and Springfield. What would you say to the community who might turn this maybe into a race issue or something like that? There's a lot of anger there.
Oh, that's incredibly wrong to be angry about that. This has got nothing to do with race. You know, I spoke about 14 people who have done the wrong thing in terms of their declaration, and they all come from all walks of life. So this is simply a group of people who are doing the wrong thing. And sadly, they put us in a very difficult situation. But brilliantly, the system works. And we do have a very, very good system that has rapidly responded to this. Can I ask, as been asked by Jeanette and the Premier, that people continue to be tested over the next few days, because that will hold us in the best stead.
But there is no protection or guard against people lying, is there?
I wish there was in society, Lane, sometimes, and thankfully we do have people genuinely do the right thing. But unfortunately, such is life, that we're always going to find that small percentage that does the wrong thing, and this is what's happened.
Commissioner, it sounded like you'd changed direction on the fine earlier. Maybe use the word review going forward. So they've been fined. and it's going to court, or would you
So one has been issued with an infringement notice. So what I am saying is that I believe that from here on in, that we will be looking at infringement notices, particularly around declarations, false declarations, and seeing whether they should be automatically going to court with a notice to appear. I want to send a very strong message about this. This is not just you come in and make a false declaration, you get a fine, that you need to be held to account. Ultimately, it is up to the discretion of the officer involved, but certainly I will be asking my senior police to look at each of those infringement notices to see whether they should be a little bit stronger than that. Thank you.
Do you think it warrants jail?
I think that the courts will hopefully look at this very, very seriously, as is the public.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.